this is Sarabjit again, and I'm coming back to you with a series of videos based on some of the questions that I've been getting after talking to many of you guys about, the differences or the things that have not made sense in the prior videos. So I've discovered a whole lot. One of the videos, this one is going to be on the role of a business analyst versus a PM, and they're different. They're pretty different. So let's start with the role of a PM. No, scratch that. Let's start with the business analyst. So the only difference between business analyst and PM is not only your role in the project, but also your involvement in the project and the type of documentation that you're going to create. Where a PM is managing the project from start to beginning, the business analyst is only typically involved, in the requirements, the testing, and the rollout phase, right? Let's start with a project manager so that we have start to end. So typically when a project is created, what happens is in many large companies, all areas, let's say marketing, finance, whatever other functions there are in the company, they typically request projects from the IT departments or the project management office areas. At that point, the projects are evaluated, and once a project is approved to be a real project, right? There may be lots of long lists of projects that never make it, which is the reality, right? Companies only typically invest dollar, time, and resources to projects that provide massive value for the business. So let's say the project is now approved. At that point, a project manager is assigned. A business analyst is also assigned. At that point, what the project manager does is works with the business analyst to identify all the areas that may be impacted for the project. That may mean that you're gathering SMEs or subject matter experts from many different areas based on the impact of the project. So once those are identified, then the project manager sits down and identifies the SMEs with the business analyst, right? They identify the SMEs, they identify the timelines, right? So let's say if the directive has come down and the project needs to be completed in 6 months, and based on the scope and complexity of the project, there's no way that we can fit that in a 6-month schedule, then it's the responsibility of the PM to lay out a feasible schedule and present it to management. So the PM is responsible for identifying all the resources that are needed for the project. Again, many companies differ, right, based on how these things are set. But typically the project manager sits down, identifies the resources, requests resources from many different teams. So let's say if there's an impact to marketing, then you need SMEs from marketing to gather those requirements based on what the project is going to do. So now you have your subject matter experts, then you need to identify a systems analyst, then you need to identify your development team, your QA teams, and typically the PM will reach out to the manager of the dev team or the manager of the QA team and say, hey, we have this project coming down the pike or the pipeline. Here are like the approximate timelines that we're looking at. Which resource it will be available for us to assign to this project. So the project manager manages the resources on the project, but they don't necessarily report to that project manager from a hierarchical standpoint, meaning that, let's say if we have SMEs assigned from marketing and we have programmers assigned and we have a QA assigned, those folks have two managers now. The project manager they're reporting to from a project standpoint, but then also their functional manager who does their day-to-day, like making sure that they're performing well, reviews, salaries, all that fun stuff goes to the functional manager. But for that particular project that we're working on, they report to the PM. So the PM role is to identify scope and to make sure that we're working the project from the outskirts of the scope. And the role of a project manager is to identify resources, to identify and create timelines and work towards those timelines. And then most project managers also are given a budget. So if you read any of the PMBOK stuff or in the three, actually, there's actually 6 things that the PM is supposed to manage, right? But the most popular things that the PM is PMs are known for is to deliver projects on time, which is a timeline, on budget, which again is a budget, and on scope. So making sure that we're not gold plating or adding additional functionality based on, customers or me saying, hey, can we please add this as well? Well, if it's not on the scope of the project, it costs time and money, so we're not going to add it. So that's the primary role of a PM. In doing that, they're also managing a team, right? So they're managing BAs, they're managing and making sure everybody on the team that's assigned to do those things need to happen. So they have leadership, they need to have leadership and management roles. The best way to describe my role when I have been as a PM is to be like the quarterback, right, in football. So you're there to support your team, you're there to help your team. You're also there to identify skill sets that are missing from the team, the project team. Let's say typically project managers have a budget, like a training budget. So if you identify the resources are identified on your team and you realize that they're missing a skill set, I've gone to management and leadership and said, hey, person X needs this training. Can I go ahead and approve and authorize that training? Because you don't want to have a team that doesn't have the skill set to perform the functions that they need to perform at. My background comes traditionally from a BA, so I've always been very hand in hand with my BAs to say, okay, where are you stuck? What issues are you having? It's also the role of a PM to remove roadblocks, right? So let's say there's a conflict. The PM at that point steps in, tries to resolve that conflict and make sure the project is moving forward, again, based on budget, timeline, and scope of the project. So now let's talk about a business analyst. The role of a business analyst is to interview stakeholders, document requirements, validate those requirements, and also to make sure that the project you're in development, right? The BA also creates test scripts, leads UAT. So these are the major pockets that the business analyst is involved in. So if you compare both roles, the business analyst is a lot more hands-on than a project manager is, but because they're different roles. So the project manager oversees the entire project from start to finish, and then the BA is integral in some pieces of that project, not from the start to end. So how can a project manager be successful is to be very involved with your project team, right? In the Agile environment, we have something called the daily stand-up meetings. In the waterfall environment, it's not necessary to have daily daily meetings, like check-in meetings, but I would recommend you have like a weekly status meeting with all of your team members individually to make sure that they are making progress and they're not getting stuck anywhere, to make sure that the project is moving along. So the PM is a role where you can be successful if you are very close to your team and your team trusts you enough to tell you what things they're struggling with. And in my case, I've always tried to do that, is to be very hands-on, be in a supportive role, and not necessarily saying, okay, you need to do this and you need to do it on XYZ. I typically work very closely with my entire team. From a BA role, how can you be successful as a business analyst is to be very closely aligned with your stakeholders. It is your stakeholders that you'll be spending majority of your time with. It is your stakeholders that you'll be interviewing, documenting requirements, going back to them for validation, and working with them during UAT, which is user acceptance testing, which is what we do before we roll out the project or product that we're working on. So to be successful in a business analyst role is be very hands-on, very close to your stakeholders, value their opinion, but also challenge them, right? A lot of times stakeholders will say, okay, I want X, Y, and Z. And it is your job as a business analyst to deliver value where value is needed. So it's always important to have that strong relationship with your stakeholders where they trust you, but also be in that consultative role where that you're not just documenting everything that the stakeholders are saying they need, okay? So it's a fine balance. I hope this answers your questions. The role of a business analyst versus a project manager, they're different in the deliverables that are due and also your role on the project. So I hope that helps. If you have more questions, let me know, and I'd be happy to create more videos and content for you guys. See ya.